The boys had a really disappointing loss 2 weeks ago, and a lot of them talked about how motivated they were, and the bye came maybe at the wrong time. How good was the training this week when they all came back?
Our training's been excellent. I think our blokes have been up and going for a while. Like, we really set ourselves to play well in the JLT, and which we did in the pre-season series, and obviously for the first 11 or so weeks of the season, and we had a bit of a hiccup against a pretty full-on Carlton side. I mean, they were up and about that day, and so the bye came at a good time for us. I feel like our guys are freshened up. We've trained really well this week, and looking forward to the challenge against St Kilda.
Big game, isn't it? Just for a lot of reasons, but I guess interestingly, the road record of late is something that you've struggled with. Have you talked about how you figure that out a bit and produce your best footy away from Brisbane?
First and foremost, for us, every game's a big game. This game's no more important than any other game that we've played. In terms of our road record, obviously we beat North earlier in the season, and we were able to go down to Gold Coast and win there. And then we've lost a couple of games by 2 goals and another game by a point. I'm not sure our road record's all that bad. We just haven't been able to finish off in front of goals in a couple of them. Certainly that was the case against the Dogs and against Freo when we had momentum. So I'm not sure that I would be making that an issue for us. It's in sport in general, it's actually really hard to win on the road, a lot harder than it is to win at home. We're always looking for ways to improve, and obviously it's something that we've talked about. But we've just got to bring the energy that we bring at home games, bring to away games, and make sure we're a pretty tight group. But by and large, the last couple of years we've been beaten fairly heavily in road games. We're getting pretty close to winning more than we're losing. So I'm pretty happy with the progress there.
I think the question, Coach, is relating to your finals aspirations and the amount of wins you need.
Yep.
And your home record is pretty good, but you're into that territory now where you're going to have to start.
Yeah. First and foremost, I'm not talking about our finals aspirations. All right, we're a team that's just trying to improve week in, week out. So that's not something we've ever sat down and talked about as a group. We've certainly talked about winning on the road, and that's what great teams do, and that's what we aspire to. And I agree with you that if you win away games, it does make getting into finals a little bit easier. But in terms of talking about it from a finals aspirations perspective, not on our agenda. Just trying to win each game as it comes along.
Well, put it to you, Coach, that poor teams talk about improvement and good teams talk about making finals.
Yeah, well,
and great teams talk about winning them.
I'll put it to you that I don't agree with you, mate, because I spent a lot of time at Hawthorn and we didn't talk about winning finals. We just talked about improving the whole time. And if you get better each week, then eventually you become a team that wins finals. That's the focus.
Does it become like an elephant in the room? Do the players must be thinking about it at some stage? Do you think you'll have to address it?
Finals?
Finals, yeah.
We have aspirations to play finals. I don't think I've ever not talked about that fact, but that's been the case since I've arrived here. That's always been the goal. But the way you get there is you just build each brick one at a time. And if you focus on the big picture too much, right? You focus on result. That can lead you to play a little bit fearful. What we try and do is focus on process, because that's fearless when you do that. You don't think too much about the big picture. You just think about what you have to do each week.
Was there a bit of that against Carlton? Like Steph said earlier in the week that it might have subconsciously happened that you're up by 30 odd and you start making decisions that you wouldn't make when the game was on the line. Do you think they were getting ahead of themselves a little bit in that?
Our players getting ahead of themselves. I was disappointed with them halfway through the second quarter with some of the decisions we made with ball in hand when we had Carlton close to on the ropes. I thought we just mucked up some really golden opportunities by trying to overuse the ball. So that's one of the things you need to talk about to your team. We're not the first team that's done that, but it opened the door for Carlton, and they got back into the game by half time, and then they got some momentum happening. So that was certainly a little learning from the game, that when you've got a team in that position, you just got to keep doing what you always do and don't change.
When we talk about wins, we talk a lot about the young players and the improvement, but how crucial have the older brigade been?
Been very important. Guys like Rich and Hodge and Steph Martin, Zorks. We need those guys to play well every week, and by and large they've been able to do that. And they set the standard for the other guys and they follow.
And another guy handed a one-year contract at the start of the year. Mitch Robinson's played every game, I believe. He's really put up his hand to play.
Yeah, he's had a great year. He's a real competitor. Sets a great example in that regard. And he's been consistent week in, week out. So, yeah, really happy with the way he's performed.
Speaking of Sorks, Fags, I'm doing a feature on him this week. I just wanted to ask how you feel he's adjusted to the captaincy over the 18 months or so he's been in the job.
Yeah, he's been great. I mean, his enthusiasm is infectious, and he's a can-do sort of a guy, and that rubs off on everybody else. And the other excellent part about his leadership is he leads from the front defensively. He's one of the better defensive players in the AFL. I think if you look at his statistics, and he's never beaten. So we've been really pleased with the way that he's gone about his footy as captain.
Just on the makeup of your team, will you eventually try and settle on a lineup to get some continuity? It's sort of, and I know some of them are injuries and whatnot, but it's just sort of, a couple of guys in and out each week. Would it be nice to settle down at some stage in the next few weeks?
I think because we're a young team, we're still learning about what our best team looks like. And, whilst we've got this season on and we want to do as well as we can this season, we're still playing the long game. So we're going to have to bring some young players in and continue to give those boys opportunities when they're deserving of it. So it'll be a mixture of all of those things. But, by and large, we'll try and pick the best team we can each week to try and win the game that we're playing.
A chance for Marcus Adams to come back this weekend?
Oh, it's so exciting that Marcus is actually playing this weekend. It's been a long road for him. We had some match practice on Tuesday. He played in the back line for the Neefle side and actually played really well. So it was exciting to see him do so well, and we look forward to him getting out there on the weekend and hopefully pushing his way into the senior side soon.
Thanks. Obviously, with the news that in Melbourne yesterday, gambling and education for the players is sort of in the news. From your perspective and this club and what it has sort of with what Alan put on the table earlier in the season, do you think that there is enough education for players? Would you be surprised if your players said, I don't understand the rules or that sort of stuff?
I'll be surprised if our players said they didn't understand the rules. They are well educated in regards to the rules, but I still think we can do more about gambling. It's a big challenge. The guys that play earn a bit of money and they've got a little bit of spare time, and so there can be a tendency to drift towards that sort of behaviour, which is okay if you keep it in check, but if it gets a hold of you, it can do all sorts of damage. So the more that we can do to educate players on how to gamble responsibly, the better. I'm sure the AFL has got that in mind, and the AFLPA, and certainly here at the Lions, we're acutely aware of it, and Alan keeps us well in check with around those issues.
Is it a tricky situation, obviously, because gambling sponsorship is so big, and you're standing in front of a gambling sponsor right now, and the AFL has gambling sponsors, and almost every club does. Really.
No, that's a fair comment, but the key to that is education. That's the whole thing. It's not which firm and who's got what on their jumpers. It's all about education and people being able to gamble responsibly. So there's lots of other evils out there in society alongside gambling that we need to educate people about. But it shouldn't stop us having those people as sponsors.
So do you think yesterday was a one out? The Magpies into it?
Yeah, we haven't heard one for a long time. I can remember back at Melbourne we had a player there that got into a little bit of trouble for a $10 bet. I don't think it was even on a football game. It might have been on a soccer game or something. But it's just a bolt out of the blue, really. So it's sort of surprising when it popped up on my telephone screen that he was in a little bit of trouble.
And you've been involved with footy a long time. Is it just so easy now for young guys, get their phone out, place a bet? Is that why there's so much prominence in the media about why this is such an issue we've got to get a handle on?
It's been about for a while, though. It's not just the last couple of years. I'm talking Melbourne Footy Club. That was 10, 15 years ago for me. Before it was really easy to access online betting. But it's probably just a little bit more, it's a lot easier now for people to do it. Just play with your phone. But as I say, the key to it all is education. It's as simple as that. The world's going to keep changing. Things are going to go at a faster pace. Things are going to be more accessible because that's the way we evolve as human beings. We have to teach people how to handle those things responsibly.
Am I right in saying that the Lions have banned team player hunting clubs and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we don't have any of that here. Yeah.
Coach, you mentioned the available time. That's one thing that's not changing. In fact, they've got such a good union. It seems that every year the players get more free time on their hands. Is it an issue? Does it worry you as a coach that there's so much usable hours in the day that you can't coach because they've got free time where they could find their way into vices?
Yeah, it depends what they use their free time for. If they're using it to educate themselves and make sure they've got some good things in place for their post-football days, and that's great, because I'm a great believer in having the balance right. I think if you concentrate totally on footy all the time, that's not necessarily healthy for you. You need to have some other things. So that spare time, if it's being used well, I'm really happy with. In terms of how much time we have with the players, I think it's at a good level now. I'd hate for us to lose any more time. That will make it a bit difficult. But there probably was a time when we first moved into that full-time professional era that maybe we were taking up too much of the players' time, and they were, wearing out from footy. So I reckon we just reached that point where the balance is pretty good, and I wouldn't like to see it tip any further the other way.
Just quickly on that Carlton one, was there enough hurt, do you think, within the club after that?
A few were in the rooms after the game, and you saw the emotions of the players. They were really disappointed with themselves. So I can only judge them on that. It's been a long 2 weeks, waiting to play another game. I wish we could have played again the next week. Certainly us coaches were really disappointed that day. But in footy you've got to move on. I mean, this competition is incredibly even. You know, Carlton Footy Club, 14 first-round draft picks in that side. They're not a bad football team. They've actually pushed some teams this year. Like they're in front of Collingwood by 2 goals with about 5 minutes to play. You know, Hawthorn narrowly beat them by 5 points down in Tassie. They're not that bad team that people sort of paint them to be. They've had a couple of bad games. And they're a bit like us last year. If you weren't on your game, we could beat teams. So, AFL footy is a tough competition now. Anyone can beat anyone. You look at Melbourne Footy Club, they've won 3 games. They were preliminary finalists last year. So they're a dangerous team. North Melbourne the same. You know, they won 12 games last year. They're not going so well this year, but they're a real threat. There are just no easy games.